Politik'Us. This is World Unfiltered, a fresh, challenging look at Turkey, the region, and the world. You might say that Turkey and the region around it, the Middle East, North Africa, the Eastern Mediterranean, is a kaleidoscope. In other words, there's not a pattern that stays the same for very long, but they're always turning, as we see right now with the conflict between Israel and Palestine, centered on the bombing of Gaza, as we've seen for a long time with the conflict in Syria, with the tense relationship towards and within Gulf states, and as we've seen in areas such as Libya and North Africa. Add to that new features of the kaleidoscope, such as a new administration in the United States under President Biden, and you wonder who can control the patterns. Well, for almost 20 years, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan has portrayed that he can control the patterns, whether it be the leader of the Islamic world, whether it be extending Turkey's influence in the Middle East, possibly even beyond, into the Caucasus and into the Black Sea, whether it's the idea of a blue homeland doctrine to control the Eastern Mediterranean. Erdoğan, as if not the master, at least the leading presence of all he surveys, has been a theme in the rhetoric of the Turkish government. But is that rhetoric reality? Can anyone control the kaleidoscope? For help on this, I'm turning to Professor İlhan Uzgel. İlhan Uzgel was a longtime prominent faculty member in international relations at Ankara University. He, like many excellent Turkish academics, were removed from their post in 2017 for political reasons. But that hasn't stopped him. Through his academic work, through his incisive political commentaries, such as on the site Duvar, through his weekly program Global Politics, he is linking up and maneuvering around that kaleidoscope by looking not only at Turkish foreign policy, but at the region and abroad to places like the United States. Professor Uzgel, welcome to World Unfiltered.
Thank you, Scott. That's a great pleasure for me to share this platform with you, and I'm honored to be with you today.
Well, my starting point for help is sort of a broad question, but then linking up to something that you've just written in Duvar. The status of US-Turkish relations has been a prominent theme from Ankara to Washington because of the new Biden administration, and because Turkish-US relations have not exactly been, let's say, easy for quite a long time. Earlier this month, however, you wrote a very challenging piece, which is called Free Fall in Foreign Policy. Are we talking right now not only about a free fall in Turkish foreign policy, but about a free fall in Turkish-US relations?
Yeah, exactly. But before I address this question, let me start by saying something about what you have said a few minutes ago, that Erdoğan controlled things. You know, it's not very easy for countries even have an influence in areas, in neighboring areas, in other countries. That's something quite difficult. You must have the power, the capacity, the capability, the will to do it. I mean, to have an influence in other countries, in other societies. That's quite difficult. But the problem with Erdoğan is not only controlling or having an influence on other countries, it is losing its capacity to control even domestic politics, which Erdoğan was very strong and was very powerful. I mean, he had almost absolute control of the things, including media, society, economy, etc. But he's losing control domestically. That's one thing that we should keep in mind when analyzing Turkish, both domestic and foreign policy. But when it comes to Turkey's relation with the United States, well, that is the most difficult part of Erdoğan's foreign policy, because it has very little room for maneuver vis-a-vis the newly elected Biden administration. And if you're asking what's the state of Turkish foreign policy right now, it's in the process of adapting to the new reality in Washington. So it's trying to find a way of working relationship with the Biden administration, which it cannot find. And at this moment, so we have to locate Turkey's place in global politics and in the Western world. For a while, Turkey has tried to have a regional dominance through its military power. What I called at that time, I mean, it was starting from 2016, 17, 18, it moved to that direction. What I called it a militarization of Turkish foreign policy and a kind of a forward defense strategy, that Turkey's defense starts from cross-border areas. It does not start from its borders. You have to, if you want to protect Turkish mainland, you have to have military presence in other regions, starting from Libya, you know, have influence in Qatar, in the Gulf region, in Caucasus, in definitely Cyprus, Syria, Iraq. And this has brought a kind of an overstretch for Turkish foreign and security policies. That, of course, Turkey as institutionalized army, which has a fighting power, the probably together with the Israel, which is also an issue of debate probably, but Turkish army has the most experienced army in this region, that it has been fighting for a long time against the PKK. It has been launching military incursions in neighboring countries for a long time. So the idea was that by applying Turkish military power, Turkey can have an influence in this area, and it has its domestic roots as well, that the Erdoğan government and Islamist government made an alliance with the nationalists and the so-called Eurasianists. So it also came as an extension of this alliance, from a domestic alliance. So Turkish foreign policy, the mentality, the mindset of it, has transformed from zero problem with neighbor to a very hard security oriented foreign policy, which led to a heavy militarization of Turkish foreign policy. But in the Trump administration, there was a kind, I mean, you know, everybody knows it, who is interested in Turkish-US relations, that there was the bilateral ties from Erdoğan to Biden, which is called leadership diplomacy or whatever, that Erdoğan can pick up the phone and talk to Putin and talk to Trump if he wants to convince him to do something, or to not to come to Turkish so hard. But that has ended. So in an institutionalized foreign policy environment, so that was difficult to go with that. So Turkey took advantage of the space that was allowed by the Trump administration for a while, and it overextended militarily, politically, strategically, and now it's time to pay it back.
Is it fair to say, in that excellent summary that you gave us, that, because I sense we may have some criticism of Erdogan in the next half hour, but is it fair to say that at the end of 2019, that forward defense approach was on the point of success precisely because Donald Trump told Erdogan, I am withdrawing the US troops from Syria. The Americans, or at least Trump, wanted to pull back American troops from Iraq. The Americans were taking less of a role in Libya, where Turkey might try to extend its presence. Is it fair to say that had Trump not been checked by the Pentagon from pulling American troops and American influence out of the region, that we could be looking at Erdogan in 2021 and saying, well, look, he played the Americans quite well and he succeeded?
That's quite difficult to say, but yeah, it definitely played a role that Erdogan tried to take advantage. I wouldn't like to say vacuum, but I mean, there was a space left for Erdogan to play in this region. So he took advantage of it together with the military wing of security-minded wing of Turkish state elements. So that was a good bargain between the Erdogan and the nationalist and the recent secular nationalist sections of Turkish state apparatus. So both developments played a part in Turkey's temporary or conjunctural overextension of its military, or overuse of its military power in this region. And in no time in Turkish foreign policy history that Turkey has involved in so many military conflicts at the same time. I mean, starting from Nagorno-Karabakh, Iraq, Syria, definitely Cyprus, they forget it, but Turkey stations 35,000 troops there since 1974. And in Eastern Mediterranean with its strong navy, and in Libya. Turkey tried to punch over its weight for a while. It was kind of a success. It looked like as a success for a while, but it was not sustainable. So this policy had its limits. So it came to its limits now, and it's time to roll back. It has entered in a rollback process right now.
So is it your perception that the assumption now in Ankara, not only amongst Erdoğan and the political leaders, but the Turkish military, is that the US is there to stay, as it were, in the region under the Biden administration, that there won't be this space to operate in that they might have had under Trump?
This is not only about Trump's decision to withdraw more troops from the Middle East, etc., but it is the point that the Trump administration does not want trouble in this region. I mean, it's not only about, withdrawing a few thousand more US troops from a military perspective. I mean, it's not about the number of troops. It's about a political order in the region that Trump, it is clear, it's so obvious that the Biden administration does not want the region to have its unending conflicts that takes decades and decades. I mean, it has started with the Yemen conflict, that it pressured the Saudis that stop it. It's not going anywhere. I mean, you will not have your aims or targets, whatever it is. It's not very clear. So probably there will be more political. It's Libyan case is moving towards a more diplomatic solution, and there will be some kind of a solution. There has to be a solution in Syria in the midterm. So Turkey took advantage of conflict situations. It's more like Iranian and Russian position that prefer to have some regional conflicts because it allows them to intervene. So the Turkish foreign and security posture moved from a country that seeks stability in its region, but a country that's taking advantage of conflicts. So it allows Turkey to engage in militarily. So with the Biden administration, this security logic has to be transformed, that Biden administration wants stability in this region so that it can focus on other regions. And probably Washington may have been a conflict fatigue. I mean, there were too many conflicts at the same time, and starting from the Arab Spring in 2011. So they wanted to end and to have some kind of a regional order where Turkey accommodates to this new reality in the region. So that's the point. So they don't want Turkey to involve in every conflict in the region anymore.
And I think we'll be talking about those other actors you bring up, like Russia, like the Iranians.
Yeah, of course.
Before we do, you wrote earlier this month that control in this new position with the Biden administration, control of the relationship with Turkey is in the hands of the United States. Is that because of NATO? Is it because of the American diplomatic presence? Or is it simply because Turkey still has an economic dependence, or its primary economic position is tied to Western Europe and Washington?
There are two basic reasons for that, actually. One is that, structurally, from a structural point of view, Turkey is a dependent country. I mean, Turkey, depending on where you stand, you can have different definitions of the situation. Like, from an economic perspective, Turkey, a liberal economic perspective, Turkey is a mid-income country. From a realist perspective, Turkey is a regional power, probably. Or from a US perspective, Turkey is a pivotal state. From a critical Marxist perspective, Turkey is a sub-imperialist state that's trying to do the works of an imperialist power in this region and is trying to cooperate in regional affairs so that it can have some other benefits, etc. So, but at the end of the day, Turkey is a dependent country economically, and it's almost all economic ties except high level of imports from China. It's the same story with every country. If China makes a foreign trade, it has trade surplus. I mean, that's the rule. And on Russia, that Turkey has to import energy, I mean, natural gas, basically. But in terms of investment and financial flows, it's totally dependent on the Western. Economy is doing quite bad for a long time. There's an economic downturn, and the Erdoğan government cannot cope with it. First time in recent history, Turkey has high inflation, which is about 17%. Actually, it's more. High unemployment, about 10%, more than 10. We know it, and they're playing with the numbers, statistics. It's the Turkish lira is losing value, and it has a foreign debt at about $450 billion, and it has to find about nearly $200 billion each year to recover it. And tourism industry is failing. No dollars. So it's stuck. I mean, it cannot move. And secondly, from a foreign policy perspective, Turkey has its self-isolation moment in its history. I mean, there's no any other time in Turkish foreign policy history that Turkey is so isolated in its foreign policy and has almost no friend. There are a couple of blocks that Turkey helped build. First time in history, the US and the EU declared openly that they will coordinate their efforts in dealing with Turkey. We haven't seen it before. And first time in history, the United States openly sided with Greece and Greek Cypriots. The United States, I mean, the perception in Turkish public is quite different, but from an academic and objective point of view, the US policy has always been balanced against these two allies in the region. But now this balance has been disrupted due to AKP policies. There's no other explanation for that. And first time in history, Greece, Israel, and Egypt, they came on the same page. That's another block. And first time in history, Turkey has been part of the inter-Arab, inter-Gulf affairs that Saudis and United Emirates, they build up a bloc against Turkey. And who are your friends? Qatar? Yes, it has some economic weight, but we don't know. But what I will say here, I mean, it's quite risky, but it is a part of a criminalization of Turkish foreign policy. That it's not clear, it's not transparent. Qatar is, we don't understand, as somebody who is working on Turkish foreign policy for the last 20 years, I haven't understood what are at odds with Qatar. It's not a neighbor of Turkey, no historical ties, no ethnic relationship, etc. While Turkey is a very close ally of Qatar, and Turkey has troops in the military base, basically in Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates has emerged as an arch enemy of Turkey, which we cannot find any explanation for that. So the relationship with Qatar and the relationship between Erdoğan and Emir of Qatar, so it's a gray area about what's going on between them. We don't know. There are family ties, etc. So that was not a tradition of Turkish foreign policy, and we don't know what it includes and what kind of a deal was going on between them. That's one of the big problems in Turkish foreign policy. So under these conditions, Turkey does not have any instrument that it can use against the United States or any other country. So it's in a process of both adapting the Biden administration and trying to fix the relations that it has broke for a while ago.
Maybe if we could pick up on that point to move from the US to, like, let's call it a quick tour of the region for everybody, definitely. Which is, so there has been, and perhaps a simple attempt at an explanation for the Turkish shift to favoring Qatar, including in Qatar's split and indeed conflict with Saudi Arabia and UAE, which is an Islamic or an Islamist, even foreign policy, that Erdoğan, and the shorthand for this is Muslim Brotherhood, is that both Erdoğan and Qatar were much more sympathetic to the Muslim Brotherhood, that Erdogan was supporting Islamist groups in Syria as well. Would that be an explanation for this Turkish intervention in the affairs of Gulf states that you have argued is counterproductive?
No, actually, I mean, that may be a part of the story, but it doesn't explain the whole story. Turkish military intervention in Syria has its own dynamics. It's nothing to do with Islamist politics. It is quite a security-oriented move that Turkish state, not only Erdogan, I argue here that even without Erdogan, Turkey would have done the same thing in Syria. That is the Kurdish issue, the threat perception that Turkey has for many decades from the PKK, that it's branching in Syria, that it's PYD. But this is a different story. But Turkish involvement in the Gulf region, that's also nothing to do with Islamist politics. There's the Saudi Arabia, I mean, which is even more Islamist than this is Wahhabi. So it is more about personal relationship. It's more about financial issues that we don't know yet, but probably we're going to learn after this government somehow loses elections. For now, it's an opaque kind of a relationship. Maybe we don't know what it contains. But Islamism or pro-Muslim Brotherhood foreign policy does not explain Turkish foreign policy right now for a while. I mean, it's part of the reason why Erdogan government, supports Hamas or the Sarraj government in Libya. But it's not the story. But I mean, you cannot explain Turkish foreign policy towards China then, where Turkey totally ignores the Uyghur Turks, the Muslim Uyghur Turks, that they plight at least in this country. So I mean, it's just part of the story that Turkey has very good relations with Iran. I mean, there are not so many problems. It's stable at least. So I mean, on Turkey, some kind of a relation. Even I tried to use Russia as a balancing force against the US, but this policy has failed. I mean, it was not possible to play one power against the other for a long time. I mean, you have some other instruments at your disposal, and Turkey didn't have it. So they know that this is the weakest point in Turkish foreign policy history. I can sincerely say that.
Let me play, as they say, devil's advocate, which is if we say take this to maybe Syria and northern Iraq, that could we not argue that we have a partitioned Syria that's in effect now 3 parts of a country, but in the Northwest, in terms of forward defense, or at least, beyond borders, Turkey is the controlling influence, supporting anti-Assad factions in the Northwest. It has established a strip of control, a corridor of control in the Northeast, pushing back on the Kurds. Could you not argue that at least in Syria, Turkey has sort of pushed out beyond the border, in part because it was able to balance between the US and the Russians while playing the Kurdish card to justify military action?
That's true, yes. I mean, in cases where Turkey has relied on its military power, it has initial success because it is powerful. All the wars, all the conflicts, all the wars Turkey waged, and all the conflicts it was involved in, waged against sub-state actors. ISIS or ISIL, Islamic State, PYD, Haftar. They were not, I mean, Turkey had air superiority. I mean, it has, fighter jets, military helicopters, armed drones, and it has a military force of 400,000 troops. So of course, it has some access on the ground. There's no doubt about it. But the problem is, this is the diplomatic side of it. What's going to happen in Idlib? So some 2 years ago, Russian-backed Syrian jets, or probably even Russian jets, they killed around 36 Turkish troops. They bombed the Elbatiye military base where Turkey had in control. They didn't declare who bombed the base that Turkey was in charge. So there's some messages, because if you overstretch so much, I mean, that there are many countries that have many means to punish Turkey, to give message through military means. But yes, initially, Turkey has some inroads into Syria. It has some military success. Of course, PYD is a very weak force, actually, if you compare with Turkish military. But on the diplomatic front, there is the issue of Idlib that nobody knows how to solve it, because there are thousands of radical jihadists there, and Turkey has control of them. I mean, to what extent it can control it, it's debatable, of course. But what happens if Idlib was cleared of the radical jihadists and the Syrian army would come to the shores of Afrin, where Turkey has the military control? So what are you going to do? The Syrian region, probably together with Iran and Russia, will force Turkey to withdraw from those areas that Turkey's military is currently occupying. So if Turkey withdraws its troops, and that would be a backlash for the government, how you explain it to government? If not, you will face a military interstate war. So that is, of course, there's an initial success. The problem is not to launch an attack on a neighboring country or on a country 2,000 kilometers away, but the problem is to maintain your troops there for a long time or find a political solution. In this aspect, Turkey is quite weak. Otherwise, militarily, Turkey, of course, it's a regional power in this region.
So short-term military advance faces the challenge of medium to long-term politics and diplomacy. There's an area, the Eastern Mediterranean, which is not really mentioned that much where I am in the UK, or indeed in US media. But it's a vital part, I think, of what you've written about in terms of Turkish foreign policy with this idea of the blue homeland, the maritime strategy. Yet you've written in recent weeks about an East Mediterranean imbroglio, whatever the nautical equivalent of a quagmire is.
Yeah.
Why do you see Turkey being in trouble in terms of both security and the competition for Eastern Mediterranean resources?
Yeah, I mean, Eastern Mediterranean was one of the areas that Turkey was so assertive that both domestically and externally, the Turkish government declared that we control these areas, this sea area. I mean, that's a very critical, strategically important part of the world. And Turkey was so confident that it can control the exploration efforts, etc., in this region. And it declared a doctrine called Blue Homeland. And I call it the shortest lived doctrine in Turkish history, that it took 2 years to implement such a doctrine, that Turkey, withdraw its, at one time, Turkey indeed chased foreign companies, multinational companies, drill ships in this Mediterranean. It didn't allow it to drilling operations in this region. And it clashed with French Navy, it clashed with Germans, but under pressure from the EU, Turkey backed down. If Turkey, the AKP government continued with its policy, there would be sanctions from the EU, and they could not face it. And they said, okay, we will not send our military navy anymore. We will not send our drill ships anymore. So what I call it as a negative cooperation, that Turkey is not actively cooperating, but it does not have the role of troublemaker anymore. But in the Black Sea region, Turkey is actively cooperating with the United States and NATO, that it has militarily supporting Ukraine, it has militarily supporting Georgia, it has joint military exercises with the United States, that there's an active cooperation with NATO and the United States there. Whereas in the Eastern Mediterranean, Turkey has pushed back its previous position, its very assertive position in the Eastern Mediterranean, which was called Blue Homeland. Even ironically, the retired admiral who developed this doctrine was put into jail in Turkey for a while. Then he was released. But that was I said the Blue Homeland doctrine is in jail now. That was my ironic title for a while ago.
So we're having problems here finding a success. I know we could talk about Libya, but you've talked a little bit about how Turkey's having to shift to diplomacy there in terms of the internal conflict between General Haftar's forces and the government. There's Nagorno-Karabakh, where, of course, Turkey was very much on the side of Azerbaijan in the conflict with Armenia. But what I wanted to ask you is something you referred to just now, which is Ukraine, which is quite interesting. I've noticed in recent weeks that President Erdoğan personally and the Turkish government has stepped up the projection of its role in Ukraine. We've, I believe, had a presidential visit by President Erdoğan to Ukraine. He's also, of course, spoken to President Putin in Russia. Why is Turkey trying to work with Europe and the United States in terms of Ukraine? Are they trying to work with Putin? Are they trying to move unilaterally? And if so, if they're moving unilaterally, is it Erdogan still being aggressive, as it were, or assertive with foreign policy, or is he trying to cover up for failures elsewhere?
Well, one of the rare successes of Turkish foreign policy was to compartmentalize the issues with Russia, with Putin. Somehow worked for a while. Both sides have divergent positions, or even they faced each other, like in Libya, in Syria, in Ukraine, but they were able to compartmentalize it. But why Turkey is so assertive in the Ukrainian case is that because it's one of the areas that Erdogan government can collaborate with NATO and with the United States, because it cannot face confronting the United States in all fronts. That was not possible, that was not logical, and that was not sustainable. But I mean, my argument is that actually there are only one problem with the United States. This is the S-400 missile system. Other than that, they were all ordinary issues that can be handled easily. But one problem stems from Turkey's position in the Western world, that it cannot dictate its own agenda on the relationship. It's an asymmetrical relationship. I mean, I'm talking about Turkish-US relations, and Turkey cannot determine which issue should be tackled first. So it has a more subordinate role in this relationship. I'm not accusing the AKP government, but I'm critical of the Turkish government because it has lost its options to use against the United States or against any other country. You cannot confront the United States while you're breaking up your relationship with every country, every single country in your region. That was more problematic. So apart from the S-400, there is no other issue between Turkey and the United States that cannot be solved. It's a kind of a stumbling block, and Erdogan is trying to use it as a bargaining chip, which is, I mean, like the Halk Bank. I mean, probably I don't know if you have the details of it, but the Turkish state bank, which is involved in trade with Iran, and that there will be some kind of a court trial this month or next month. So the Erdogan is trying to use, I mean, he can get rid of the S-400 systems, which was purchased from Russia, but he wants something in return. And that's why we have this problem. Other than that, Turkey can handle any other issue with the United States, and it can be a compatible ally as well. Erdogan is ready for that. Erdogan is trying to find a way to convince the Biden administration that is going to be a good ally of the United States.
Let me again play devil's advocate to bring it around to Turkey and US and say that that's a good logical explanation that if the S-400 Russian supplied anti-aircraft missiles are removed and Ankara no longer has them, in return, the US lifts the pressure on the Turkish state bank, Halk Bank, over violation of Iran sanctions, everyone's happy. But the devil's advocate in me says this: in 2016, President Erdogan expected some sign of US support during the coup attempt that failed. Not only did he not get US support, he didn't even get a US phone call, whereas he did get one very quickly from Vladimir Putin of Russia, and that President Erdogan still has a personal animosity against those Americans who didn't support him. And of course, Joe Biden was the vice president then. Is Erdogan, in your view, willing to set that aside at any types of, as it were, memories of what happened in 2016, looking forward in relations with the United States?
He's not interested in this. The only thing that he considers right now, he's very much concerned, is that he wants a good ties with the Biden administration, because, as I told you in the beginning, that economy is failing. Politically, he's losing ground. He's losing constituency. All recent public opinion polls show that his party is declining. He lost 4 biggest cities in Turkey in mayoral elections. There are 2 parties that emerged from his former working, friends and colleagues and party members that they've found two different parties, and struggling with pandemic, the COVID-19. There was the response to it was open failure now, and it's isolated in foreign policy and in the region. So he has no way out. And Russia cannot play the same role for Turkey, for the Erdoğan government. So he needs the United States, its support. And the Erdoğan government always had both domestic and foreign external supports during its 19 years of incumbency. So it's Erdoğan does not have the luxury to deal with the post-coup attempt period, etc. He desperately needs Biden's support. I can tell you that, and he's ready to. Even Biden administration's recognition of the genocide was a historic moment in bilateral relations, and Erdoğan's response to that was so weak. The basic parameters of Turkish foreign policy is that Erdoğan himself is prioritizing domestic politics over foreign policy. Foreign policy for Turkey right now is closely tied to Erdoğan's maintenance of power. So what brings him more power? This explains his foreign policy moves, actually.
Okay, big finish. Professor Uzgel, the Erdoğan government or its successor, they come to you, they say, we're sorry, you're right. Our foreign policy hasn't been coherent. Our assertive foreign policy has had short-term military success, but long-term diplomatic political setbacks. Help us. What's the first thing you recommend in terms of realigning or reshaping Turkish foreign policy?
I would suggest him, I don't basically, but hypothetically, that start from domestic front. I mean, one thing that they insist on missing is that a democratic country with respect to human rights, freedom of speech, media, rule of law, this makes you stronger in foreign policy. They don't understand it. They think that if they have a tight control of the domestic front, they would be more powerful vis-a-vis other countries, but that works in the other direction indeed. So I would suggest any Turkish government that as much possible as democratic in the domestic front. So what you needed first. Second, you must have a guideline. And currently, for a long time, Turkish foreign policy does. I mean, we don't know the priorities of Turkish foreign policy. What Turkey is trying to do in the world, in the region, nobody knows. They don't know either, and they don't pay attention to that. I mean, what are Turkey's short, medium, and longer term aims and goals in foreign policy and in security policies? What kind of a Turkey we want to live? What kind of a Turkey we want to build up? What kind of a Turkey we are looking for in regional order? So the Turkey does need a strategic plan or something. That if anybody asked me, a student, a foreign expert, so what is the goal of Turkish foreign policy right now? We don't know. It's not clear. It's a day-to-day politics, right? For a while. I mean, we cannot talk about Turkey wants to do that in this region and Turkey wants to do that in this region. So we cannot say this. That may be a policy option, but it is not. The problem is that you can develop an understanding of foreign policy based on ambivalence. That may be a policy option, but it's not the case here. It's not intentional. It is dictated by mistakes it has committed so far.
Well, I think we found a common point because we started with Turkey and the United States. You recommended starting with the domestic front, stronger at home, you're stronger abroad. exactly what President Joe Biden and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken have said in recent months in the United States.
I realize that, yeah.
Let's see if Ankara does the same thing. Professor İlhan Uzgel, thank you so much for that tour of Turkey and the region and the world. Let's hope that some folks are out there listening to your advice. Let me also thank the folks at Deep Dive Politics for putting us on air, holding everything together during our conversation. And let me most of all thank you, viewers, for joining us. A reminder that you can follow Deep Dive Politics on Facebook under Deep Dive Politics. You can follow it on Twitter under dive_politics. And of course, all of our World Unfiltered video casts are on YouTube, or if you prefer the audio version, you can find them on Spotify. But for right now, I'm Scott Lucas. This has been World Unfiltered. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other.